Doctors of Reddit, what are the craziest excuses you get for people putting things up their butt? When I was first interning at a trauma center, a dude said he went to his daughter's bathroom since his wife was taking a while in the shower. Says he slipped and up into his ass goes his daughter's whole Barbie doll. When we did the x-ray, we saw Barbie. Not only was she way up in there, but her arms were straight up and hair was everywhere. It really looked like she was having a grand time. Dude was found laying face down on his couch, completely naked, with a fishtail sticking out from between his cheeks. Firefighters and paramedics were trying their best to not laugh. He never gave an excuse. All he said was, "It was frozen when it went in. The fish thawed up his ass and the scales made it so he couldn't pull it back out. He ended up needing ass surgery to remove the fish." Also, to top it off, like I said, everyone was trying to be professional, but just before the ambulance doors closed to take him to the hospital, one of the firefighters pokes his head in and said, "Next time don't play with your food, buddy." At this point no one can keep from laughing and everyone except the patient loses their composure. The patient tried to sue the ambulance company for not being professional but soon realized it would mean this entire incident would go public and change his mind. Shaving cream can. Not a small one. He didn't have an excuse, and he was rather proud of himself. He asked for a copy of the x-ray. Flared ends. People. Flared ends. My personal favorite was a dude who clearly had a golf ball up there after I checked on PR exam. Yes, my finger was up his butt. Me. "So you've got a golf ball up there?" Him. "Yeah, but that'll come out easy. It's the cue ball in there that I need you to get out for me." He said that he'd heard that mangoes are good for hemorrhoids. He did the only logical thing when armed with this information. Mango up the butt. It required wriggly forceps to get it out. Good times. At least he admitted to putting it there. That's a step in the right direction. Not a doctor, but an amusing story nonetheless. A friend of mine was downstairs in her living room watching TV after putting the kids to bed. Her young son suddenly appears at the top of the stairs and starts calling for her. She asks him what's wrong and he proceeds to say, "Mummy, I wasn't sure whether to put the Lego up my willy or up my bum. So I put it in my bum, but now I've lost it. A choice no one should want or need to make." Fortunately, after a quick trip to hospital he passed the Lego and no harm came of it, and his sister was bribed not to tell her school friends with copious amounts of ice cream. In the hospital I worked in through university, word used to get around pretty quick when someone came in with something up their butt. They always said that they fell on it. One was a tennis ball, and he said he was watching tennis on TV while naked and playing with tennis balls, then fell on one. We always joked about how sick people can be, until one day a guy came in with an apple up there. Of course he fell on it. Detectives later came to interview him. When we became aware of their theory that it was there because he owed the wrong people money, it all became a lot less funny. Not a doctor, but we did have a guy many years ago with a butternut squash lodged in his rectum. No excuses. His fetish was well known as he was a frequent flyer. What's the diameter of his butthole? Obligatory, not the butt, but the urethra. Used to have a repeat offender who would make frequent visits to our. He used to like to stick things in his dong. Pencils, pens, straws, etc. The last time we saw him he had inserted 1/2 2-inch drywall screws into his urethra, manually, with a Phillips head screwdriver. He kindly brought the screwdriver with him, just in case we didn't have the right tools. After surgery to remove the screws, he wound up with a suprapubic catheter. Lost track of him after the screw incident. He never complained of pain, was always polite and thankful. Just a weird fetish, I guess. And yes, he was referred to psych many times. My ex-girlfriend is a nurse in a +E, the British version of the year, and she came home with all sorts of weird and wonderful stories. One that stands out is of a guy that came in with a rubber snake firmly lodged in his beige daisy, like whole way up there, nothing dangling. He apparently had some pretty weird friends who made him shove it up there as a forfeit during a drinking game. Okay, alcohol makes you do some weird crap, but this guy, and his brother's rubber snake, survived the incident. Another nurse eventually got it out of him that he had tried again at a later date. I guess it awakened something in him, and liked the feeling, so kept slithering it up there with the intention to pull it out. I guess like some anal bead type thing. But he got it almost the whole way, and his ass did that weird winking thing. and it all went inside, almost never to return. This all happened in Scotland. Strange people, and I guess very open to sharing. Father is a surgeon. Here are some of my favorite dinner time tales. First story he told me was pretty funny. Guy came in with a whole wrapped Pepperidge Farm summer sausage stuck inside. Dad said basically they just needed to attach a clamp to the knot on one end and slowly pull until it eventually came out. Turns out this happened the night of the hospital Christmas party. So before the party, Dad runs to the Pepperidge Farm booth at the mall and buys another sausage. Upon arriving at the party, he found the doctor who attended the procedure and proceeded to rant about people wasting such a great product and started slicing off pieces of sausage and eating it. Also, the story of the guy with an entire set of billiard balls up his ass. They came out in numerical order, so the guy obviously took his time and didn't ignore the small details. People are weird. Not me, but my friend told me this story. When she was a med student, working in the hospital, a male patient came in complaining of stomach pains. Apparently, he was moving very carefully, because she determined that he likely had something in his ass. When they did an x-ray, they saw a stack of Legos in this man's colon, complete with a little Lego person at the top, with his little Lego arm sticking up. She called me on her break to tell me about this, and about how she could never look at Legos the same way. I got her son some Mega Bloks for his birthday shortly after this. It's always I've never done anything like this before, or I met a girl last night who talked me into it. Like, no dude. You don't just go from never doing it before straight into peeled mango followed by a 12-inch rubber dong folded in half. You just don't go from zero to mango. Not a doctor but have worked in radiology for years. We had a patient come in who had a vibe stuck up his butt and was totally straightforward about it. He said it had been up there for almost 24 hours. He had been trying desperately to get it out but no luck. He was in pretty significant discomfort. Shortly before we went to get him for his X-ray, a note was placed in his chart that essentially said patient states the batteries have finally died and is feeling much better. We of course thought this was hilarious, but we were also very impressed at how long the batteries had lasted. One of the techs joked that she would have to find out what model he had. Had a patient once like this. Small vibe stuck in her butt. I was being all professional, starting the IV, and it was dead silent except the faint humming of the toy. Patient broke the silence and said, "Dang Energizer batteries." So my mother is a radiographer. She once x-rayed a guy who had an entire, unbroken light bulb up his ass. His excuse was that he was putting cream on his hemorrhoids when his dog ran into his legs and he fell backwards onto a lamp. It was taped to a stick, and when they removed it, it had a condom over it. Well, if you're going to fall on a lamp, you might as well put a condom on it. Only logical. Not my patient, but one of my colleagues told me a story about a guy who came to the OR with a cucumber lodged in his ass. He told them he was gardening and fell down onto a cucumber. He was also insisted that the staff not tell his wife about his hospital visit. Friend of a friend is an EMT. Last year he responded to a call for a young teenage boy with rectal bleeding and a colorectal foreign body, which is fansipance medical speak for something lodged in butthole. Turned out to be a 15-year-old boy with a large tree branch stuck in his butt. He had been experimenting. He made a terrible judgment call, and then he had to call 911. He didn't even bring the branch inside, just did it in the yard, which is where they found him, naked from the waist down. He told them he'd been trying to get an all-over tan and the tree fell on him. The EMTs politely pretended that this wasn't the dumbest excuse they'd heard all year. The kid was fine. This is actually statistically very likely to happen. Strong storm blows pants down, tree branch breaks, and thump. Not a doc, but I've had a patient who tried to dislodge their constipation matter by shoving a toothbrush up their rear and it got stuck very far up there. Possibly the worst stench ever when he had to have a colonoscopy. Bro had a guy with 2 baseballs stuck. One was able to come out but the other they had to take to the OR. Once they realized they couldn't take it out with force, had to surgically open the guy. Patient almost ended up with a colostomy due to the damage he caused. That x-ray was interesting. So I'm not an ED attending. I was working in an ED at one point in a very poor neighborhood in New York, and we got a call from them saying we had a disruptive patient coming in. This sort of call gets you ready for what's about to come, or not, as you'll see. About 5 minutes later we hear screaming and yelling come from the ambulance bay. It's just a muffled sound, but we can sense the aggressive nature. In come the patients. The air's loud and busy, and right now it's dead silent for 20 seconds as we are evaluating what rolled in. Mind you, at this point in the way our ED ambulance triage station works, everyone in the ED can see what just came in. It's a very open floor plan. The patient is actually patients. It's a woman laying prone with a man laying on top of her, also prone. A white flat sheet and a mylar blanket are all that's covering them. They are screaming, and I mean unholy language and anger. I honestly don't remember most of it, but I remember that it was one of the few times I think I understood why cursing was invented. There just aren't words yet for some things. So we get them into the room and uncover them. He apparently forcefully inserted himself into her anus and she clamped down with pain. He was well endowed, so it was much harder than you'd imagine to remove himself. The lube, which we think was just spit, had dried. Now the woman really looks like she's in agony. She's got tears, but she's also a dervish of anger. She's laying super still though, and every time he moves she's got nuts. So the attendings, really, cause we had surgery, GI and the rest of the ED staff consulting on this, decide he would sedate the woman and hopefully relax her enough to remove the man. It worked, but not to her benefit, as the man had done a fine mess of her backside and there was copious amounts of blood. She ended up being rushed to the OR and he was later lost to follow up. I don't know what happened to the woman, but I assume she did well or we would have heard about it. Had a kid once come in to see a neurologist. The referring GP gave us one single line, one Lego and the urethra. He was very disturbed and said that he wanted us to just cut his dong off, cause he wanted to be a girl. I have a friend who works in A&E, what we call the A here in the UK, and he had a guy and a girl come in both with each other's wedding rings up their buttholes. Kinda romantic in a weird way. Once upon a time I was a lab assistant in a hospital. One of responsibilities was to take all sorts of things from surgery to pathology. These things ranged from limbs to placenta, as well as items removed from the body, and they came down on a dumbwaiter that alerted us with a siren and flashing lights, so it was a big ordeal. We got all sorts of interesting things, like one time I had to bring a full leg to pathology, which was a lot heavier than one might assume. Anyway, we had a new hire who was super stoked to receive his first item from surgery. So the alarms go off one day and he jumps up. I got it, and the excitement on his face was palpable. He rushes over to the dumbwaiter and in one hand picks up the paperwork and the other, a giant tube of chorizo sausage. We all knew instantly what it was, but being a naive new hire he had a look of puzzlement as his eyes wandered from the tube of chorizo to the paperwork, where he read out loud, "Removed from anal cavity. OMGEW," and drops the meat tube on the ground. I can't remember how long we all laughed for, but for every holiday since he always received a tube of chorizo sausage, no matter who was his secret Santa. Friend and a nurse told me of a time that a man in his 30s comes in to have a glass dong removed because the stopper passed the Rubicon, so to speak. Dude had nothing to hold on to for safe extraction. Dude said, "Oh, haha, it was my wife's idea. Last time I'll let her try that on me." He was dropped off at the by another man. I work in the air. Guy came in with a light bulb up his ass. Didn't really say how it got up there. You could see it on the x-ray of his pelvis quite clearly. He just told us that he was at a party and mistakes were made. Trouble is, this party ended 3 days before he decided to come in. On the upside, the doc got it out safely in one piece. That thing was frickin' huge though. It was the typical round light bulb shape, only bigger. As soon as it came out, that guy proceeded to have one of the most epic and smelly 3-day overdue dumps ever. Not an doc, but I once consulted on a rubber dong that was lodged in the sigmoid colon. It had literally gone round the bend, which is why the guys needed help. Long story short, we had to scope the patient, camera up the ass. Their excuse: they got drunk and fell onto it. This story isn't that crazy until I tell you the guy was 30 years old, and his devout Christian parents had to come and pick him up because he couldn't drive after we finished his procedure. The dong wasn't the only thing that came out that day, if you know what I mean. I'm a nurse. I've heard all the excuses. One guy put a light bulb in a condom and shoved it up his butt. The x-ray looked exactly like that scene from Scrubs. I can't remember what his excuse was, but at some point during the visit he locked himself in a bathroom and tried to poop it out. I was banging on the door and screaming for him to come out and stop trying or it would break, with an interpreter next to me translating my cries since the guy didn't speak English. It was a strange scene. Not a doctor, but a paramedic. Our guy had an unlucky slip and fall onto a roll-on deodorant getting out of the shower. Poor bugger, what are the chances? I have also had a guy that was a hospital-to-hospital transport who pushed a tall narrow glass jar up his ass without the lid on it. The jar created a bit of a vacuum which sucked part of his bowel down into the jar. Most impressive bit was he walked to the ambulance. He walked like a bow-legged cowboy. Another guy that one of our crews went to, he had walked home with the shopping, realized he locked himself out of the house so had to break in. Anyway, he told the ambos that he was climbing in the window and slipped, fell backwards onto the shopping bag and a shampoo bottle went right up the leg of his shorts into his ass. We took a guy to hospital because he has 6 small plastic model horses stuck up his butt. The doctors described his condition as stable. We went to a guy who lost his vibe up there. Notes came down on our screen telling the whole story, so naturally my partner and I are giggling about this. I tell her she should listen to see if it's still on, etc. We got there and he was like, yep, there is a vibe stuck up my butt, and so partner gets out her stethoscope and says I better just have a listen to see where it is as she is putting it in her ears and before she can place the bell of the stethie on his abdo he's like, mate, I know where it is. It's in my freaking ass. She just slowly put the stethie down and they sat there in awkward silence for the rest of the trip. Yes, it was still on. Not a doctor, but one incident happened here in Philippines when one local showbiz personality got a cucumber on his butt and hospitalized because of it. His excuse: I was making a salad. I sat on a chair but there was a cucumber there in an upright position. Everything just happened so fast. Not a doctor, but a friend of mine recently had a stick break off in his ass. He wanted to imitate something off of Jackass, so he shoved the stick end of a firecracker up his butt. We lit it and the force propelled him into an awkward stumble. As he fell backwards on his ass, the firecracker broke and the stick end became lodged up his ass. They were able to pull it out, thankfully. You've been visited by the banana guardian. He will protect you and all of your bananas, but only if you comment "protect us mighty doggo." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.